Hello, and welcome to the Healthy is Happy podcast, the show that helps you get back to the basics of healthy and happy living. We're your hosts. I'm Nellie Ward.
And I'm Jennifer Maha. This podcast is the passion project of two friends who believe that healthy living is happy living. Always look for the good in others, never stop believing in the power of positivity, and think a little hard work goes a long way. To us, healthy living is simply a commitment to making daily choices that keep us on a healthy trajectory, both physically and mentally. We believe it's a lifelong journey, not a destination, and we like to be your co-host along this journey. Buckle up and stay hydrated. It's going to be an epic adventure. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Healthy is Happy podcast. Today you have your co-host, Jennifer and
Nellie.
All right, and today we have a very special guest all the way in from West Feliciana Parish, Coach Ryan Ojeda. He is the performance coach at West Feliciana, and today we're going to ask him all sorts of questions about what he does, how relevant it is to the development of youth sports, and how he got into that role. So, Coach Ojeda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Am I looking at the camera or?
Yeah, you can just
Awesome.
look at us, and it'll rotate.
Awesome.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the role that you currently play and how you kind of fell into that role?
Wow.
There's a lot.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say, so as a performance coach, obviously I'm looking to be able to improve and enhance the performance of the student athletes on the field. So the role itself is doing needs analysis of the sport, but also of the individual, and improve obviously their speed, their flexibility, their strength, their coordination. That is, in a sense, lower the risk of injury. So prevent injury through those other aspects.
So how did you pick this as a career? I've always thought that these types of coaches are very interesting because most people typically gravitate to being a particular sports coach, but you have a different type of specialty. So how did you, I guess, fall into that role or like make those choices that led to the path that you're on now?
Well, and that takes it back. So growing up, my father played soccer in South America. So we would definitely get outside, kick the ball around. But later in life, when I moved to the United States, I started playing football. And 1 year in the preseason, the middle school coaching staff would take the kids to the weight room and do some training, some resistance training. And myself, my teammates, there was a bond that was developing as well as us physically developing. And as I spent more time doing that, I thought, wow, this is something that I enjoy doing. This is something that I want to do. And like any kid growing up, the dream is, hey, I want to go to college, play professional sports in that order.
Yes,
and
definitely.
so after that, I thought, during that time frame, I thought I want to do this. I want to be involved in some form of development for individuals, these kids.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how because back then, this is the 90s, there wasn't really a lot of that around.
No.
A lot of the development, if you had a weight room, was done by sport coaches.
Right.
Personal training wasn't really a thing that you thought about. So when I got to college later on, there was I came home and I was coaching football and I was teaching in high school. There was an opportunity for what I wanted to do at a place my sister worked at. And so she asked me, hey, there's a place where I live and they have this performance training, this speed and agility training that you talked about wanting to do. Why don't you come up and check it out and see if that's something you want to do? And if it is, then you can move up here, live with me and work there. And
awesome.
that's pretty much how it began.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Awesome.
That's
Because that's really cool because you get to have your hands on with a bunch of different sports athletes. You know, you get to see from all sides. So what is your background as an athlete? You said you played soccer, you played football.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite that you played?
So I played soccer growing up. My father played professional soccer. Then started playing football, and I saw that I had a lot of success there. I ran track, played basketball through high school. I ran track, played football. I had several accolades in that. Went to college for football and indoor track.
Yeah, and you were a 200 and 400 runner, is that correct?
200, 400, 400 hurdle runner, long jumper.
The really hard stuff.
The fun stuff. The fun stuff. Stuff that makes you dig in. So, and so that's really my background is multi-sports.
Yeah.
Multi-sports.
Awesome.
Which I guess probably makes the most sense in that athletic development is you weren't just committed to one sport. You like the versatility of maybe all the sports, and then where they all come together is that development stage.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of that, not knowing at the time, but as I was going from sport to sport like any other individual does now, there's there's certain development that you go through that you may not recognize. So whether it be the energy system, the condition side of football versus basketball versus track versus soccer, the skill that's involved in positionally playing. I played a defensive back as well as receiver, but also basketball playing guard, the different movement skills, track, obviously straight line speed, plus jumping, soccer, a little mix of running, but also controlling a soccer ball. All those things, I do reflect back on some of the stuff that I had went through to be able to, in some cases, just coach things better, but also a different perspective to see how the individual's going to look at it based on what I perceived at that time frame.
Yeah, because there's a lot of overlap with that kind of stuff, that kids don't even, or anyone really even realizes how much, whenever you are conditioning and you're in season for something else, it still pays benefits to your next sport.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So now you're working at West Feliciana. Can you tell us how you arrived at West Feliciana? I know that I am a resident, everyone, of West Feliciana. And you came very with a lot of accolades behind your name. Like I'd heard we were getting this great coach. This is really cool. And then you showed up and you started doing some really cool stuff. So how did we procure you into our small town?
Well, I'm humbled and I appreciate that. So I was in New Orleans. I was working at Athletes Academy, and I got a phone call from Coach Fuller one day. Another coach friend of mine had put my name in the hat, and we had a great conversation. He asked me about the things that I was doing at Athletes Academy. And I asked him some things about St. Francisville, which I had never heard of before. And
like, where on the map is this? I can't find it. I haven't zoomed in.
He shared the vision and some of the things that he was doing. And I thought that sounds really great.
Yeah.
I would like to learn more.
That's awesome.
So he invited me up to be able to meet with individuals. It was just an interview.
Yeah.
But also opportunity to just share my perspective and how I would see something like this working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had a great conversations with the people that were involved. And I just saw it as this is something, they shared the vision of what they wanted to have. And I shared my experience to be able to say, hey, this is kind of some of the things that I think would happen or the way that it could go.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's something that is going to take some growth. It's going to take some challenges. But as long as we're able to see where we want to go, then we're okay with that.
Yeah.
And that having them be open to the growth and share just their collective investment into the future of the programs,
right.
It made me want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So awesome. What would you say, like your vision, maybe your North Star for every day? Like what do you want to see happen to like sports in high school where you are, if they keep growing, like what's your vision for what you're doing right now?
Right. And to piggyback off that, that's really I'm part of the big vision.
Picture. Yeah.
Right. So I believe it's a collective vision, what the school wants to do and the people that are involved in the community that want for their kids in the school to invest into that. And what you want to have the same way we look at schooling for education, a scaffolded model where you have these kids that are going to be developed over time. Well, the same thing with this. Going to the middle school where I work in the mornings currently and be able to take what does our PE program look like and what are some things that we can adjust to make it more athletically, providing athletic performance with it. So we put pieces of it in there, and then we have to obviously reflect back over time, measure, see what worked, what doesn't, take it out, move forward. But what it does is it introduces a general foundation. So when these kids get to high school, they feel more be able to adapt.
Yeah.
They feel that they're ready to take on these challenges as opposed to, and you probably already know this, that 75% of kids, they quit their sports before in middle school. So why is that happening? It's happening most likely because they don't feel confident that they're ready to perform at a certain level.
Yeah.
So if we can provide those opportunities for them to feel by learning, by, in the sense, some aspects of guided discovery, or allowing them to have the bandwidth to try something new in the sense of, hey, it's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah.
While you're working to improve.
Yeah.
As opposed to, okay, now you got to go into this game, into this tryout, and it's got to be done this way. You get 2 shots, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
You're out.
Yeah.
You're out.
I will say that last summer you guys put on just a sports camp in general to kind of expose some of the lower kids to the different motions and concepts of sports without it being a tryout. And it sounded really cool. So I sent one of my sons to it. And he had never in his life thought about playing football. And like he came home and he was like all wanting to play because y'all had introduced him to this skill set in a very comfortable, safe space where it was like, hey, try this movement. And before he knew it, he was doing football things without knowing it. And he kind of fell in love with it. And then he became more confident and went out for the middle school football team last year. And I thought that was a really unique approach from a parent standpoint of like, oh, I don't know if you're cut out for football. I don't know if you should, like watching it from that developmental stage, like bringing him in and where he felt like he was part of a community as opposed to, I got to try out. Like you're saying, you got 2 shots, you either good or not good. It was a different approach and it worked phenomenally.
Right.
And now he's kind of all in and we can't get him out of football, which is fine.
Well, and that's how programs, I think that's where a lot of coaches make the mistake is they don't approach programs from the level of the young kids, and that's really where you're going to see, what you put in as, when
reap what you sow, I
when
guess.
your kid's a 6th grader,
Right.
Okay, so now when he's an 11th grader, it's like, wow, that because we developed that kid and we had this program in place, we have a football player that's a valuable part of the team that might not ever have tried,
Yeah.
Right.
So that's super cool.
Yeah, it's really a long-term athletic development model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So LTAD.
Yeah.
And when you get to your sport, it becomes so sport specific.
Yes.
So how do we introduce some of these different modes of movement, these different skills, so they have more bandwidth, they have a foundation that they can go from sport to sport
Yeah.
and be able to just adapt better over time.
And lower that risk of injury, like you're saying, because they understand more about how their body works and the fluidity of motion and those types of things.
And so the vision, it's not complete, but how does that develop over time as we start to develop a program for the middle school into the high school, into the athletic periods.
Yeah.
So it's something that can expand further, not just into the athletic time, but also into the physical education department in regards to health and fitness.
Yeah.
What does that look like moving forward into this next decade?
Right. Because I think Nellie and I joke a lot about the term like athlete versus athletic, and we sometimes argue about it and then make fun of each other as it relates to that.
No, she makes fun of me.
This is a true story.
Okay.
But you have people who are like naturally athletic and their bodies can just like, you show them how to do something, they can get it. And you have other people who you kind of have to go through it more than once. And I think like you're saying, like teaching these kids these foundations, the kids who are not naturally flagged as athletic can become athletes by practice, memory, muscle, like that type of growth that prior to that sort of concept, I think auto eliminates kids from things that they might actually really excel at because they just didn't have the confidence or they didn't think they could do it. But now that you have coaches who are looking at it differently, that's opening doors for, I think, a lot of kids to be athletes who maybe were not born athletic.
And you made a great point. And people talk about confidence. So once a child becomes confident, they feel empowered.
Yes.
They then have more autonomy.
Yeah.
So now there's a higher chance of them going out and doing things on their own.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit extra practice, maybe other sports.
Yeah.
And that just expands their ability to be able to be more confident in other
Absolutely.
endeavors.
Yeah.
So to me, it is in a sense like a classroom,
Yeah.
but we're able as coaches, anybody involved in this, to give them more room to explore in certain aspects.
Yeah. Which
in
I think
some
is
cases.
phenomenal.
And because you have so many kids that have different individual abilities,
Yes.
that can be scaled.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's also playing such a role in, still, no matter what we do, it's only going to be a certain amount of percentage of people go and play pro sports, but the longer you keep kids engaged, the more you instill these healthy habits. Like, I mean, just in the state of Louisiana alone, we have a huge battle to fight of obesity and people not being active and chronic diseases.
Yeah.
Teaching kids those valuable lessons early that they have in sports and they learn in sports so they can carry through their life just makes people better people in general.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I had a where I was at before my previous school, we had to introduce lacrosse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with lacrosse or with the stick with the
We
ball.
know what
Okay.
it is. We
All right.
never, I think Nellie tried
I
to
had
play
a
with my
lacrosse
kids,
set.
and I don't know that went very
Okay.
well. But
So a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So you have some kids, they're, oh, what is that? Oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the week, coach, I like lacrosse. When can I do it again?
yeah, that's fun.
And that within itself is a child who maybe has already a perceived, how he sees him, he or she sees himself, perception. Now they're able to see, well, I didn't know it, but I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So what does that do to the child later on to not be so just negative about something?
Yeah, I'll try it.
To being brave, right? So
Exactly.
we, Nellie and I also, in addition to this fabulous podcast, everyone, we also do blog posts periodically.
Awesome.
And I wrote one last night about
We have lots of things to say.
yes, about the ability of sports to teach kids a variety of things, but one of those is bravery, right? Like, you don't know if you're going to be good or bad, but you should at least try, especially in a safe setting, because like you may actually not be good at it, but you learn something and it could have just been fun, like with the kid with lacrosse, right? Like, we've never played this before. We don't know how this is going to go, but we're going to try it anyway. And maybe you like it, maybe you don't, maybe it makes for fun memories 30 years down the road, but like that ability to be brave and know that like I can try things translates not just to sports, but then as you become an adult, like it helps you make different decisions in your life and not pigeonhole yourself into what you think the only things you can do are. It expands that horizon, I think.
Absolutely, and that's part of the vision is the people that at St. Francisville, they see that. How do we create that environment for those people, for those kids, take those chances?
Yeah.
And later on, maybe not right now, but as you mentioned, later on in life,
you
really
come
reap
back
the
to that.
benefits
Like,
of it.
I was driving one of mine from home from football practice yesterday, and we were talking about just sports in general, and I was joking with him about some of the things I remember from playing sports when I was young, and very little of it had to do with a game or a win or a loss. It was just the shenanigans that we would get ourselves into.
Right.
And I was like, those are the things that you carry with you. It's like the bonds you make with other people, the confidence you build. Like, those are the things you take with you. You remember some of the wins and losses, but it's more of that lifestyle that becomes a part of you that 30 years later, you still are like, those were the best days.
Great point. There's a big social aspect of it where kids learn how to be socially intelligent. When you're in school, you obviously have a small window in regards to class transitions, maybe some downtime in class or lunch and so forth. But sports are a big part, after school activities are a big part to really get to know
Other
your
people.
peers and in
Absolutely.
how you interact with the people, have some different type of adversity through sports. So that's a great point. I know that, we look at it as for how we provide the opportunity holistically.
Yeah. And it's
Not just the sports side of it, but it's also
the rest of it.
the mental, the emotional.
Like my son was telling me yesterday, his favorite parts of middle school football last year were sitting on the porch of the school the days they had games and eating like snacks with his friends and just chit chatting and like in downtime,
Right.
And I think there's also an adaptability that comes to that, because when you walk into a new team, especially like a football team or maybe a soccer team where there's a lot more players and you've never done that before, being able to adapt to who these people are, what the situation is, and how do I fit in and how can I fit in both on the field as an athlete and just in that social setting. Like, how can I become a part of this community and both add something and take something away for myself?
Well, and socially too, it's, if you have two kids that don't know each other and they're on the tennis team, well, they automatically have something in common because both of them signed up to be on the tennis team. So it's already kind of an instilled, okay, well, there's some connection there, let's make friends.
And I think that if we're able to get kids that are trying sports for the first time at a middle school through our different development programs, it becomes the culture of knowing that these kids are new. I was new.
Yeah.
Now I'm able to be more receptive, more inviting, because I understand how that was for me. I want to continue to do the same. And you learn to be a servant. You learn to be a servant leader.
Yeah. To all those
I love that.
athletes. Yeah.
I love that.
It's a very different perspective, and it's great. I mean, I grew up not same time as Nellie, who's significantly younger than us, but where they didn't have athletic coaches. We just had like a football coach who kind of told the girls what to do in the weight room. We didn't know if we should do that or not, because I was like, I don't want to look like the linebacker over there, so I'm going to kind of adapt my own workouts, which probably wasn't a good idea at the time. But it's impressive to see like how far things have come with attention to detail and just like I can't even say that, the specifics of each sport and athlete as they sort of develop. So I know that like if you're thinking about like how do you develop kids into athletes, like advice that you would give to parents of young athletes, right? Because I think, like you were saying earlier, like sports are moving along at a faster pace. Like people are specializing in earlier ages, and like this competition and fear of missing out is like hyper getting.
Heard of FOMO, right?
Yeah. It's so big. And so parents, I think, want to do what's best for their kid, but we don't often know what's best for our kids. So like if you have young athletes out there who are like, my kid wants to play X sport or wants to try this, like what advice would you give them to kind of keep them in a good mental and physical space?
That's a tough one, because I also have my own kids.
Yeah.
So it's really give them the bandwidth.
Yeah.
I think that we all know our children when things are possibly good or something they should go through.
Yeah.
So I would say give them the bandwidth to explore other things.
Yeah.
and be able to not just turn things off completely, but make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make mistakes and be okay with that.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing. When you talk about development, just like in the classroom, you have to have opportunities where even though you do your best, it may not work out the way you want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And instead of just always learn that in the game, you can see growth in training.
Yeah.
You can see growth in performance by just sheerly working towards something over time. Things work out a certain way. Sometimes they don't, but you still show up, you still work. The work ethic, I would say over time is built in.
Yeah.
Because you see that you've invested so much into something and you have this end result. So for parents, give kids the bandwidth.
I think that's great advice. That's fabulous advice.
So I have one question because I'm curious. What's your favorite sport?
That's a tough one. I played several sports and I was fortunate enough to do very well in them. But I would say probably the sport I spent most of my life in so far, which is football.
Football.
Yeah.
Football.
Both as a player and a coach? Or would it be different if we ask you like favorite sport to play, favorite sport to coach? Would there be a divide?
If you
Or
were to-
watch. I mean,
if you-
come on, we can make this go on.
Right.
My goodness, see, now we're going all over the place. I would say to play and coach, I would stay with football currently.
Yeah.
Although I enjoy other sports, soccer, basketball.
Yeah.
But I think that just there's a certain amount of investment I've put into for so many years
Yeah.
Yeah.
that there's an emotional attachment to that
To that sport.
with itself. But I also enjoyed. I coached my girls a couple years back in volleyball,
Okay,
rec
that's a great
volleyball. So
sport.
I enjoyed watching that
That's
and coaching
fun.
them.
Yeah.
So
That's
that-
fun. So I think the one thing I've always been interested with in football is it's a sport where you have so many moving parts. It's like a car, right? Because you have like individual coaches who coach all these different teams, and it like the whole thing moves as one team. But like
Right.
unlike other teams, it's a very compartmentalized, right? But in order for it to work, everyone has to work in sync. And so I think that's kind of cool because it's not like soccer is a very fluid game, right? It's very reactionary. Baseball is static to fluid in an instant, but there's all these situations. But football is this very planned, mechanical motion.
it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the interesting things. Is it's such a complex sport that it probably never gets boring because you're like, well, we can tweak this one part over here and this
Yeah,
one part over here. and then
absolutely.
the machine moves in a different way now.
You can't just go out there and play pickup football.
No, you can't.
No.
You can't. And that's one of the things that I think, soccer is a great sport because you can. Basketball too. Like I grew up playing basketball and I could always just go shoot in the yard by myself. I didn't need another person.
Right.
But football, you really can't. There's
Just
no
throw the
part
ball
of
up,
it.
catch
Yeah.
it, and over and
There's
over.
really no part of that you can do by yourself. So you have to have other people in the mix for that. So what is the best athletic advice that you've ever received? Both, let's take it into like as a coach, but then also as an athlete when you were growing up. And like, was there some person that said something to you one day that kind of like clicked and you were like, oh.
Not necessarily in that sense as far as just one piece of I think it would have to go to what I said earlier as far as just more give yourself bandwidth.
Yeah.
You obviously know the quote, practice makes perfect, but then it becomes, practice makes permanent. So you have to practice a certain way. But I think that especially my role is when you're introducing new things, it may not always be done right.
Yeah.
It may not always be done well. It may not be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can get it to be done, you're moving in the right direction. And being able to understand that individuality is important.
Yeah.
Because then that person is moving at a certain pace, which at first they may not feel like they want to be that invested, but over time that grows.
Yeah.
So being able to give people that bandwidth is important as an athlete, but also as a coach.
Yeah.
You have to give yourself that bandwidth.
Yeah.
Not saying that you can't work towards something that you want to be able to accomplish over time.
Yeah.
But there's a certain amount of social intelligence. It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Especially in the development stages
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great.
that you have to be aware of and learn to have that skill.
Yeah,
So
and to be
being
adaptable.
patient and be
Yeah.
adaptable.
Being adaptable. Yeah.
And
Yes.
that goes, I would say that goes with having that bandwidth, like I said.
Yeah. Just,
So as a player, as an individual, it's my first time or I'm doing certain things. Now there's different levels to that.
Yeah.
How talented am I? What are my expectations? I've been doing this for a while.
yeah.
So what is my room or my margin for error that I'm willing to give myself, that's going to vary. But as long as I'm giving myself that margin for error over time, I can, Lombardi said, chase excellence, and at times you'll catch perfection.
Yeah.
I love that.
Nellie and I, about a year and a half ago, took up tennis. And we had a real big margin of error. And
I still have a big margin.
Yeah, there you go.
We got a little bit better and a little bit better, and then I
Right.
got injured and kind of quit
I haven't played
for a
tennis.
while, but
I actually
it was
played pickleball. The
it
other
was
day,
one of
though.
those things where as an adult we don't often try new things because we get stuck in like whatever it is that we normally do. And I'm not really exactly sure how we ended up trying tennis, but like I got a tennis racket for Christmas and I was like, I don't know how to play. Let's try this. And it was a comedy
She always
of errors.
wanted to play tennis. You've always wanted to play. I was like, okay, well,
I mean, you get the cute outfits, right? I don't know.
I started playing
Great
pickleball.
weather.
Yeah.
I played pickleball once, but I just want a shirt that says like pickleball. Like I just think that,
Pickleballer. You should get
Pickleballer.
one that says Pickleballer.
no, but trying
But it
new
was
things
fun.
is always fun. You're never too old to try new things.
Yeah, and
ever.
we had a blast because like
Right.
we actually took lessons, and it was like going to practice again for the first time in 25 years, and it was maybe the most fun I'd had in a significant period
and
of
then
time.
she
And
broke
we were
herself.
not good at it, but it
Okay.
did not matter.
So you both just said try new things is fun, but when can you reflect? When was a time that you thought, yeah, you know what, I enjoyed doing these things?
Yeah, well, right
Somewhere along the way,
yeah,
you had a certain experience.
Oh, yeah.
with sports that
Yeah.
made you think, you know what?
yeah, as
we're
a
gonna do
kid,
this. So
yeah.
for a long time, we were triathletes, and we still are. Everyone, we're not done with that yet. But that just took up a bulk of our time, mental space, physical space, financial
yeah.
investments because it's not cheap. And then we just didn't have time for that anymore. And I don't know. It was like, why don't we try this new sport? And we didn't even know the rules, right? So we started playing with people, and they were going over things, and I was like, well, how do you keep score again? Like, what is that?
Let's be real.
What is
I
this?
have like athletic fear of missing out, and so like she started playing tennis, and I was like, whoa,
This is
you can't
true.
play
This is
tennis
true.
without me.
Nellie just showed up in Westfeld, doesn't live in Westfeld. I got a tennis racket.
I'm here. I'm ready.
What? And that's where the athletic athlete came into place. And I was
Right.
like, "Whew, this is gonna be rough." we had a blast though, and we took lessons, like we learned more about it, and then I got injured and couldn't walk for a good like 2 months, but from playing tennis.
And you know what does that look like later in life? So we talk about the athletic development, but at some point your high school career is gonna end.
Yeah.
When you play sports professionally, at some point it's gonna end.
You're not gonna do it
So
anymore.
what does that look like later in life? And I would share with my student athletes that maybe for you it's gonna be rock climbing, maybe it's gonna be biking, maybe it's gonna be dancing, maybe it's gonna be skating. There's other ways to be involved in fitness later on once this finishes, but this is a way to give you just a foundation, introduce these new ideas, but also introduce how you respond to new ideas.
Yes, whether you're open or not.
That's exactly.
And realizing the identity too behind it, because you can your identity, you can be an athlete your whole life, but you're not going to be a baseball player your whole life. So being able to say, okay, baseball is done for me, but I'm still an athlete. Like I can go do other things.
And
Right.
not being afraid to try new things, right? The other day, our son was at a baseball tryout, and the guy in charge, that's exactly what he said. He's like, we're here to build baseball players and strong young men. And he goes, because one day, no matter when that day is, you will not be a baseball player anymore. And we don't want your identity to be hung up in a specific thing, but a mindset.
Your
And it
life
was
is
like,
not over
that's a
at
great,
27,
That's a great,
you know?
I'd never thought about that. That was
100%.
a great way
Right.
to put that as we're like, as you as a coach and like us kind of in some of the influential things we do, trying to develop athletes in different ways, like to have that bandwidth open mindset where you're not pigeonholed into, I identify as a whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to identify as a tennis player, but I think I'm gonna hang that up.
Working on it.
So I think we have a few closing questions here, and one of them is, again, as a player and a coach, like separate these two, but like best athletic moment as a player. Okay, someone who's played multiple college sports, high school sports, lots of sports, that might be hard. You can give us more than one. If you
I
want
guess
to do a humble brag
the
for a
ones
while.
the ones that come to mind. So athletic accomplishment. In high school, I was voted my senior year the #1 athlete in the county.
Oh wow.
wow.
So it was an old grad award
Yeah.
down in Atlantic County, New Jersey.
Sweet.
Nice. Round of applause there.
Yeah, right?
That's
That's
impressive.
awesome.
So
That's impressive.
that kind of encompassed all the accolades that I worked towards
Yeah.
That's
over my high school
awesome.
career. As a coach, I would say I had my private business in New Jersey, and so I would say a couple of things. One, as a coach, is seeing the investment I made into my athletes pan out for them, seeing them win state championships individually as teams. So
Yeah.
It validates guys going to play professional sports. It validates just what you're doing as a person and as a professional for these kids' lives. And that gratitude that was shared with, from the parents and them, I appreciated that. And
awesome.
and when you're in it, you're not thinking that far ahead.
Yeah.
You're just serving, you're coaching in that moment, then the next athletes and so forth. And I would also say my first state championship as a coach in New Jersey as well.
Yeah. That's huge.
So
what sport was that in?
Football.
Football. That's awesome.
Football.
That's awesome. So did you have a coach along the way that was a big inspiration in your life?
I had several coaches.
Yeah.
I would say that ultimately my parents instilled the work ethic and the drive that I have. And then the coaches were just able to guide it in a certain way and do certain things. And the different styles of coaching, from maybe some that are a little bit more reserved to some that are more extravagant, more energetic, more intense, being able to pull and extract the coaching points from all those different styles, that's important as well.
Yeah.
So high school track coach, high school football coaches, high school basketball coach. So there were several coaches.
Just had a good impact. So as a parent of children that go to Westville, I know that you are a football coach, but could we ever talk you into becoming, other sports that might need your expertise after football season?
Well, currently I coach the other sports really because I'm
the trainer.
I'm the performance coach in that sense.
I'm thinking a wrestling program.
So-
Just going to put that out there.
I have no experience in wrestling, but I will learn.
Saying maybe.
Maybe. Well, Coach Ojeda, thank you for being on our show today. And I know I speak for a lot of people in Westville. We were all excited when we heard you were coming, and you, like you guys said, your name came with a lot of accolades and a lot of how did we manage to get that man to come to our really small town? Because the work that you guys are doing, and I've seen it firsthand, and just the group of kids that my kids hang out with, they're going to reap the benefits of that, not just as athletes on the field, but as adults as they grow up. And we're very grateful to have you. So,
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, stay tuned, guys, for more great episodes from the Healthy is Happy podcast. And we'll be back in a few weeks.
Adios.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Healthy is Happy podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at Basic Living BR, Instagram for all things healthy and happy living at Basic Living BR, and for more nutrition focused content, follow us on Instagram at _basic_eats.